Humans have imagined many worlds for thousands of years, across completely different civilizations, and across thousands of years, people keep returning to the same strange possibility that the reality we experience might not be the only one. Ancient myths describe countless worlds beyond our own. Modern physics explores the possibility of multiple universes, and films keep telling stories about alternate realities. Three completely different ways of thinking about the universe, and yet they all seem to circle around the same idea that reality might be far larger than the world we experience. So the real question isn't just whether multiverse exists. The real question is, why do humans keep imagining it? Hi, in this video I want to explore why this idea keeps appearing across ancient cosmology, modern science, and the stories we tell today. Because once you start noticing this pattern, it begins to show up everywhere. You can see it clearly in modern storytelling. In The Matrix, the characters slowly discover that the world they believed was real is actually a simulation, one layer of much larger system. Reality itself turns out to be deeper and more complicated than anyone imagined. Other stories explore the idea in a different way. In Everything Everywhere All at Once, the multiverse becomes a way of exploring the countless lives a person could have lived. Different choices create different versions of the same life unfolding across different universes. And in Dark, the TV series, reality itself becomes tangled across time and parallel worlds. Characters encounter different versions of the same events, and sometimes even different versions of themselves. Each story approaches the idea differently, but they all circle around the same unsettling possibility that the world we experience might be only one version of reality. And once you begin noticing the idea in stories, something even more interesting appears. This way of imagining reality didn't begin with modern films. Long before cinema and long before modern physics, ancient traditions were already imagining a universe far larger than the one we see around us. Hindu cosmology expands the idea even further. It suggests that universes themselves are not permanent. They appear, exist for immense periods of time, and eventually dissolve, only for new universes to emerge again. Reality becomes something cyclical, something constantly unfolding across unimaginable stretches of time. To understand the scale of this imagination, consider one idea from these traditions, a concept known as kalpa. A kalp represents a single day in life of Brahma, the creator figure in Hindu cosmology. And according to these texts, one such day lasts about 4.3 billion years. After that comes a cosmic night of the same length. Then creation begins again. The universe itself becomes a part of an endless rhythm of creation and dissolution. Some traditions imagine the universe in an even more philosophical way. They describe the entire cosmos as existing within the being of Vishnu, sometimes poetically imagined as a part of a dream. When the dream ends, the universe dissolves. Reality itself becomes layered, something that might exist on levels deeper than the world we experience. And then there is one idea that captures the interconnected nature of reality in particularly beautiful way, a concept known as Indra's net. Imagine an infinite web stretching across the universe. At every point in the web sits a jewel, and each jewel reflects every other jewel in existence, endlessly. If you look at one jewel at a time, you see the reflections of all the others. And inside those reflections, you see reflections again. Reality becomes an infinite network of connections, every part reflecting the whole. When we encounter ideas like these, an interesting question appears. Were these simply symbolic ways of describing existence, or were ancient thinkers already trying to imagine a universe far larger than the one they could observe? For most of history, questions like these belong to mythology and philosophy. But in the last century or so, something changed. Scientists began studying the universe itself, and they started encountering possibilities that sounded strangely familiar. Interestingly, modern physics has begun asking questions that echo the ancient ideas, not through mythology or philosophy, but through mathematics, observation, and experiments. Over the past century, scientists studying the origin of the universe have discovered something unexpected. The universe itself appears far stranger than we once imagined. One idea that emerged from cosmology is something called cosmic inflation. According to this theory, in the earliest moments after the Big Bang, the universe expanded incredibly rapidly. Space itself stretched out at an extraordinary state. But some versions of this theory suggest something even more unusual. The process that creates our universe might not have happened just once. Instead, it might happen again and again in different regions of space, each region forming its own expanding universe, almost like bubbles forming in vast cosmic ocean. If that idea is correct, the universe we observe might be only one bubble among many. But cosmology is not the only place where these questions appear. Quantum physics, the science that studies the smallest particles in nature, leads to another strange possibility. In quantum mechanics, particles can exist in multiple possible states at the same time. One interpretation suggests that every possible outcome of an event might actually occur, each outcome unfolding in a different branch of reality. In that view, reality itself could constantly split into many different versions. And then there is another puzzle that has led scientists to consider the possibility of multiple universes. The law of physics that shape our universe appears to be incredibly precise. If the fundamental constants of nature were even slightly different, stars might never form, galaxies might never exist, life might be impossible. Some scientists have suggested that if many universes exist, each with different physical conditions, it might explain why our universe appears so finely balanced. But despite decades of research, these ideas remain deeply uncertain. The multiverse is not something scientists have proven, it's just a possibility, a hypothesis about how reality might be structured at the larger scales. And yet, it is fascinating that modern physics, using telescopes, equations, and particle experiments, have arrived at the questions that echo ideas imagined thousands of years ago. Is our universe the only one? Or is reality far larger than the world we observe? While physicists explore these questions through equations and telescopes, stories approach the idea in a very different way. Stories ask what these possibilities could actually mean for humans. Because when people imagine multiple universes, they rarely thinking about the galaxies or physics. They are usually thinking about something much closer to home. The life we might have lived, the choices that could have taken us somewhere else, the quiet feeling that life could have unfolded differently. This is where the multiverse becomes deeply human. In everything, everywhere, all at once, the multiverse isn't just a scientific concept. It becomes a way of exploring all the different lives a person could have lived. Different choices create different versions of the same life, unfolding across countless universes. A life where the decision changed everything, a life where another path was taken. The film turns multiverse into reflection on possibility itself. Another stories that explores the idea in a darker and more unsettling way is in Dark. Multiple realities exist simultaneously, shaped by different versions of the same events. Characters encounter alternate versions of themselves and slowly begin to realize that reality might not be a single unfolding story, but many different timelines tangled together. The series asks an uncomfortable question. If different versions of events exist somewhere, how much control do we really have over the path our lives take? And then there are stories like The Matrix. Here, the question becomes even more unsettling. What if the world we experience isn't the deepest level of reality at all? What if what we call the real world is only one layer of something much larger? Across all these stories, the multiverse stops being just a scientific hypothesis. It becomes a way of exploring human possibility. The paths we took, the paths we almost took, the lives we sometimes imagine when we wonder how things might have been different. And that might explain why the idea keeps appearing in human imagination. Because the multiverse doesn't just expand the universe, it expands the possibility of life. Stories about other realities are rarely about physics. They are about the quiet thought that life could have unfolded differently. A different choice, a different path, a different version of the same person. And maybe that is why the idea keeps returning across time, in mythology, in science, in the stories we tell. Because life contains the same quiet question: what might have been different? And whether or not the multiverse exists in a physical reality, the idea itself reveals something deeply human: our curiosity about the worlds beyond our own, and about the lives beyond the one we are living.